Hi, this is Russell, and this is my presentation on the New Testament survey. So, what is the New Testament? The New Testament is a collection of writings and letters from the early church about Jesus Christ and their faith in him. Now, the New Testament it was written after the death of Jesus, and it was written during a time of intense of Roman rule and intense persecution of the Jewish people at the time. And the writings that are used in the New Testament are often used to show correct doctrine, testimony of Jesus, as well as the history of the church. Now, the structure of the New Testament is that it begins in our Bibles with the Gospels. And they start off with the Synoptic Gospels, which are Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and then goes in the Gospel of John. And all these cover the ministry, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus. From here, it goes on into the Acts of the Apostles, and this is the formation of the early church from Jesus' disciples after he had left, and then the ministry of Peter and Paul, especially, and how they created the church and what it ended up becoming later on into the church we know today. And after this, there are the Pauline letters, and these are Paul's letters that he sent out. And multiple of these were to different churches, for example, in Romans, but some of them were also to individuals. And then there are the Catholic letters, and these are the letters to the general church that are not from Paul. For example, there's the letter from James that is to the church. And then finally, there is the book of Revelation, and this is a letter from John, which was a message to the churches at the time, and it is also the main piece of apocalyptic writing outside of Jesus of some sayings of Jesus in the Gospels, and this mainly pertains to the future and the things to come. And so in my presentation, I mainly wanted to go over why was the New Testament written. So originally, the testimony of Jesus was carried by word of mouth, and it was not written down. But the New Testament it was written years after Jesus' death. For example, Mark was written around 50 to 70 AD, and the reason it started to be written down was people, started to fall asleep and were killed during Roman persecution, and it started to become a need for the testimonies of Jesus to be written down for future generations as people proceeded to die and for Jesus, and since his coming was taking longer than was expected. And so, because of this, there started to be multiple writings of Jesus at the time. And because of this, there are multiple texts describing the life of Jesus and his teachings. And so, over time, there started to be a lot of these. For example, there started to be like the Gospel of Judas, the Gospel of Thomas, and not many of these. Some of these writings were true, but some of them were false documents and honestly did not have teachings that agreed with the church and what was known of Jesus. And so, because of this, there became a need to canonize Scripture or to decide what Scripture would be true and the church agreed on. And so, because of this, there was a council early on in the early church, and they decided, where they decided what writings they would say are Scripture. And the main way they did this, one of the main way they did this was to decide, was the scripture written during the time of the early church? For example, was it written within 20 or 30 years after Jesus? Or is it written, 120 years later after he died? And the other main ways they decided if scripture would be canonized was if it agreed with existing scripture, did it align with the character of Jesus, and if it was accurate and beneficial to the body. Now, if scripture is rejected, it doesn't mean that it's just instantly heretical and of no value. For example, the book of Enoch in the Old Testament is beneficial even to us, even though it's not in our Bibles, because multiple New Testament authors quote it. And so, in that way, that book is still helpful to us as we read. And so now I wanted to go on to, is the New Testament reliable and accurate? Now, in my opinion, I believe it is so because it was carefully chosen by the early church. It was written within a decade of Jesus' death and has been faithfully preserved and has survived numerous persecutions. So, yes, my name is Russell, and I want to thank you for listening to my presentation on the New Testament.